as I may consume.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Madam Speaker, first I want to say how happy I am to be back, and I appreciate the welcome I've gotten from all my colleagues. And I've missed you terribly. I've missed you, as we used to say in Kentucky, like a front tooth. The bill before us today, Madam Speaker, is another wasted opportunity, I'm afraid. Today's legislation is composed of 14 separate bills, several of which are even bipartisan. But regrettably, these worthy proposals will not be signed into law because the majority has packaged them with other proposals that endanger our environment and public health. Several of the controversial provisions before us are based on Democratic proposals, but unfortunately, the Democrat bills were taken and rewritten in such a way, extremely, that they can no longer receive bipartisan support. Two provisions in particular illustrate the extreme and partisan approach. First, Title III would unnecessarily change a long-standing agreement and endanger the biologically sensitive Alaskan wilderness. This provision would open up our nation's largest national forest to logging and allow rare old-growth forests for private gain. Second, in the most extreme proposal before us, Title XIV would impose a so-called operational control zone over almost 100 million square miles of American land. The federal land within this zone, the Department of Homeland Security, then would be allowed to ignore 36 environmental laws. And federal border agents would be allowed to operate with few limits on their power. My good friend from Utah has put forward an amendment to pare the 36 laws down to 16, but that is still 16 too many. Title 14 proposes a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. Proponents claim that environmental protections prevent the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol from stopping illegal immigration, but however, sworn testimony by both the Border Control officials and the Federal Land Agency officials contradict this claim. In fact, the Department of Homeland Security opposes the legislation. My entire district, all of it, would fall under the newly created Operational Control Zone. And as a result, U.S. Customs and Border Patrol could take control over all the historic landmarks, such as the Theodore Roosevelt National Historic Site, build anything on it they needed. And I know my constituents pretty well after this number of years. They would not take to that at all. Meanwhile, the sacred, historic, and sovereign lands of the Tuscarora Indian Nation would also be open to federal agents. Such an extreme federal overreach would violate the sovereignty of the Tuscarora Indian Nation. Many other tribes around the country whose land falls within this zone would face the same problem. In a letter to the leaders of the House, the United South and Eastern Tribes wrote of the danger of this provision. They wrote, "Many Indian tribes have lands and sacred places located near the U.S. international borders, and we believe the sovereignty and cultural integrity of our member tribes and others is unnecessarily put in jeopardy by the sweeping approach of this bill." Federal cooperation, not federal overreach, is a proven and prudent way to protect our borders. A recent GAO report confirmed what we learned in sworn testimony. Every time federal cooperation between the Border Patrol and our land management officials was requested, it was given, every time. The only time conflicts remained between environmental laws and border enforcement was when Border Patrol officials didn't bother to ask the Department of the Interior nor the USDA for cooperation. Finally, it is worth mentioning that the majority violated the rules of the House when they combined 14 unrelated bills into the one bill before us today. However, the Rules Committee gave itself a waiver, despite repeatedly denying such waivers for Democrat proposals throughout the year. Once again, when the majority wants to break the rules, they find a way, but when Democrats ask for a waiver for one of our proposals, all of a sudden, the rules of the House have been written in stone. I urge my colleagues to oppose today's extreme and partisan legislation and to stand up against the federal overreach contained within this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from New York reserves her time. The gentleman from Utah.